So everybody is awake right now. If half the room is asleep at the end, I won't be surprised. One thing I've learned when you turn 52 is that you need your little peepers here. So I need to thank Chuck Sutherland for some photos that he loaned me. This presentation is titled 10 Years of Quiet Discovery, the Untold Story of Exploration in Scotts Gulf. Between roughly 1994 to 2003, that date range is a little fuzzy because we'll see here in just a minute, but we did a lot of work in the Gulf during that time. And there's a lot of stuff in here, and I know we're recording this, and there might be some sensitive maps, because it's really ironic to me that I'm standing here in Fall Creek Falls State Park, and at the time we were doing this, we had no idea whatsoever that Scotts Gulf would eventually become part of Fall Creek Falls State Park. So it's really kind of amazing. Let's see here. So the setting, Scotts Gulf. Who has caved in Scotts Gulf before? Probably a lot of folks in this room. Yeah, it's an awesome river gorge. Roughly 500 to maybe 850, 900 feet deep. The part that technically I've always thought of as Scotts Gulf started way up here from the Caney Fork, even past Lockwood Cave, and even including Bee Creek down here from the south. Bee Creek flows from south to north. Caney Fork from roughly east to north coming down, and they join right here, and then they flow on out towards Rock Island State Park. The Gulf itself is roughly, I don't know, 10, 15 miles in length, depending on how you count it. But just a beautiful place. And right now, this is one of the old topo maps that we use. And I'll just say, too, that in that time frame that we were doing this project, this was before we were using GPS, LiDAR, any of that, and even before like digital cameras or cell phones. You know, we had the point-and-shoot film cameras. I used to regularly carry my 7.5-minute quad with us with all the pencil marks on the map folded up. And so that was kind of the technology we're talking about. So that's why I had to get pictures from Chuck. So the cast, we had a bunch of us, 4 of us actually as a core group. There were a lot of people over the course of this project that were involved, but really there was a core group of 4 of us that did likely well over 125 trips in the Gulf. Starting in the upper left up here going clockwise, Glenn Ritter. Some of you who are rock climbers or familiar with the rock climbing community might know that name. Glenn put up a lot of the routes at the Obed and Clear Creek and Foster Falls, places like that. So he was a climber who kind of was pulled into caving by me, so I was looking for a partner. So Glenn Ritter, Robert Oakes, raise your hand, Robert. Yeah. Right here, that's myself, and Jack Thomason. Jack, raise your hand. Jack back there. So that was kind of the core group of us that did most of the trips throughout the course of that 10-year period. We had 4 others that also did a fair number of trips with us too. I'll call these guys the support cast. Kevin Zinn, up here in the upper left. Tony Robinson, another rock climber that did a lot with Glenn. David Brace from Knoxville, and John Wilson.
Probably me. My apologies.
So we followed in some pretty big footsteps in Scotts Gulf. Some of the folks that were active prior to us in Scotts Gulf, there weren't that many. But some of them are kind of like, in my mind, sort of the giants of speleology. And to see John Smyer here today is wonderful because he is one of the giants that we followed in his footsteps. Jeff and Michelle Sims, Haven Holzapfel, Larry Matthews, Ellen Hanna, John Smyer, and Ross Cardwell. So this picture here I got from Jeff. This is Jeff on the left with Haven Holzapfel on the right. Haven was a NOLS instructor for the National Outdoor Leadership School. And he was really interested in kind of getting a group of NOLS folks together and do some stuff in the Gulf. I guess Jeff said that they were doing some rappelling that day. And you'll see in a later slide or two that they did some work in Rose Cave. But prior to the time in 1994 that our group started our work, there were only 56 caves listed in the TCS for all of Scotts Gulf. 56. And there was only one cave that was mapped over a mile in length, and that was Virgin Falls Cave. So our first big find was Beckoning Well. And Beckoning Well was found in January of 1994 by Jack Thomason and myself. And this is Jack's map of Beckoning Well. This is a spectacular pit. I'm not sure how many folks here have done this one, but it is just an amazing pit. We actually found 4 caves that day, and this was one of them. But it was just an amazing cave. And interestingly enough, there was another group of cavers on the ridge that day when we found it. Gerald Killian and Rosie Hawkins, and Robert Oakes was actually part of that group too, and Jeff Patton, and I think Anthony Olberdine was in that group. So we named it Beckoning Well because it seemed like the cave was beckoning cavers to it. Literally, Jack and I had found the pit. We were uncoiling our rope, getting ready to do it. We didn't have enough rope, so we had to tie 2 ropes together and pass a knot. And just as we're getting ready to go down, that's when we see the other group of cavers ridge walking up, and we found the pit right at that time too. So, kind of an interesting story. But that was really the start of our work in the Gulf. This is a photo that I borrowed from Bob. It's an incredible photo that Bob takes really nice stuff. But you can see what the pit looks like here. It's a free fall from the lip. It's a really wide, a big pit. It's just a great pit. Good stuff. So right about that time for my life, this is a little bit of a personal story from me. I was doing quite a bit of caving all over Tennessee. A lot of work, some in Alabama actually, some in Georgia, different places in Tennessee. But there was a lot of activity going on in the Jordan Knob. And it was about that time that Serendipity Pit was opened up. It was about the time that Nirvana was opened up. Guppy boating had been open for a while. We were doing trips in there. And so I was really interested in Jordan Knob. And so I took some solo trips up to Jordan Knob, and I found a sinkhole that was a big snowmelt spot. And so we started digging on that. And it turns out we had like 18 or 20 dig trips that year. And it turned into a cave called Hero Bucket Portal Hole. But on the day that we actually opened up the cave, so it was pretty much going, Jack Thomason went through one place in the cave, and I was crawling through, and the whole wall just collapsed. And I was right underneath this section of wall, and literally, if it had been 2 seconds earlier, I wouldn't be here today. So it greatly changed my life in a lot of ways. And so this is just a picture of me. I think this was the trip right before we did the breakthrough. But it was a time in my life where I was really under a lot of self-reflection. I think I really needed to kind of get away. As Jack would call it, I'd go on these sabbaticals where I just kind of disappear. But one place that I decided to disappear to was Scotts Gulf. I felt like I could kind of get there and sort of maybe control some things. But so I started doing solo trips in Scotts Gulf. And so really, this is what the start of the project was in my mind, around 1996 or so. On that first solo trip, I found 7 new caves. On the next trip, I found 3 new caves. So on every trip that I took, I was finding new stuff. And it was just like cave after cave after cave. And I was parking way up on top of the mountain. No one in sight, and I'd be hiking long distances off the edge of the plateau. I thought this probably isn't sustainable for the project to have one person do this. So what I did was I enlisted the help of Jack and Glenn Ritter to come with me. And that's Jack on the left and Glenn here on the right. And so we started taking these trips in the Gulf, just the 3 of us. In 1997, we really started our work there. We would go on these long walks, and we'd find these places to park that were sort of out of the way and kind of quiet and tucked away. And one thing I remember of Jack is that he would always carry this Gatorade with him on these long walks. We'd have 8, 10, 12-mile walks, and he'd always have this Gatorade called Fierce Grape, and that we had to get through the day. And Glenn would always carry a long-handled shovel with him as an walking stick. So we'd find all these holes and he'd be digging these things open. We just had a big old time up there. Not a lot of advertising of what we were doing. At the time, TagNet was the Facebook for cavers, right? A lot of people here remember TagNet. And so I started writing up a few of our trips on TagNet, and people were kind of wondering what we were doing and where we were going, but we weren't really telling people what we were doing and where we were going. But this was pretty much it. I mean, this is kind of a picture of what it looked like on these trips. We would go in all 4 seasons, like that's me up in the upper left in the summertime. This is Glenn, I think, sometime in the spring. You can see his pant leg tore off for some reason. This is Jack in the dead of winter on a day when everything was frozen. It was just incredible up there. And we did some bridge walking that day. And then here's an pouring rainstorm over here. He's checking out Smollett. But just some really, really good times. A lot of walking. I mean, our trips, we would carry full backpacks and 25 pounds of gear and ropes and shovels and everything. And even some survey gear too. So a lot of walking and a lot of lead checking. And this was one of the places, it's hard to tell the story really. I was talking to my wife last night about this, and I said, I felt really great about this presentation, but I kind of was going through the slides, and it's just so disorganized. It's hard to talk about an area that you spent 10 years in and found all these caves. And she said, well, maybe people that will enjoy it are people that don't really care for order. I said, maybe that's cavers. So anyway, this is one of the areas that we had some success in, a place that we called Gaston's Hollow, also known as Mill Hollow. And the red dots here that you can see are cave entrances that were previously known prior to our working in the hollow. And all the blue dots are new caves that we added, brand new to the TCS. Some of the ones that we found included Deadly Promise, which is a cave that has 6 pits, it's 230 feet deep. Storm Chaser Pit is a nice open air pit. Gaston's Cave was one that's found right around the lower Banger limestone. G5 Cave is a cave that we mapped almost 1,000 feet long. It's in the upper Banger. And then there's this Gaston's Moonshine Cave, which is up in Pennington. There's a pure layer of limestone in the Pennington Formation that we had quite a bit of success in. So you can see there were all different levels of the limestone strata here that we were finding caves in. Lower Monteagle, Hartzell Monteagle, Lower Banger, Upper Banger, Pennington. So we really, really found quite a bit. And I'll just mention too that even after our work, I think I saw Clinton here somewhere. Is Clinton?
He just left.
He just left. I'll wait to talk about Clinton when it's back.
Oh, talk about him while he's not here.
This is a map of G5 Cave. This is kind of the typical stuff that we were putting out. This is back in 21 years ago, in 2000. Drew this up for the TCS. Nice cave. The front part here is pretty nice. There got to a point where there was a low airspace for about 100 feet, about a 4 or 5 inch airspace. And we called it G5 because we kind of had this. Glenn and I had a running joke with rating caves, kind of like how you have boulder climbs or rock climbs, how they rate climbs. So on our G scale for cave, like G1 was a really easy, nice walk for cave. G5 is a really grim cave. So we named it G5 cave for this section down here. Gaston's Cave, this was one of the nice caves we found in that hollow, about 3,300 feet long. When we found it, Jack and Glenn and I were walking up the hollow, and I was walking literally in the hollow following the riverbed. And Jack and Glenn were up on the side, and they found this entrance off to the side of the bluff. And they went down in it, and oops, I keep tripping over this cord. Went down in the entrance and got down here and were crawling in. And Glenn got to the point where it sort of started to pinch. And Glenn, actually, no offense, Jack, but Glenn was a lot thinner than Jack. But Glenn's a rock climber, and he's not used to pushing through holes like this. And he got down to that point, and he said, I don't think this thing's going to go. And Jack said, let me take a look at this. And got Glenn out of the way, and Jack scooted on through there. And within a little bit, he's standing in a 100-foot wide borehole, virgin borehole right here. And so Jack to his great credit, he stopped and just said, let's come back with Mike and survey this thing. So next trip we came in and mapped all of this. And, I mean, it's a great cave. We probably did 5 or 6 survey trips in here. Lots of good stuff in this cave. So here's some pictures from way back then, some nice formation areas that we found in there. This is the entrance pit. It's got a 26-foot entrance pit. And this is back deeper in the cave. And some more formations. This is some sketching we were doing. This is Jack looking at some helictites on the wall. Really nice stuff. So another area that we spent some time in was around the Big Laurel, Little Laurel Creek area. Those of you familiar with Virgin Falls Pocket Wilderness may recognize this trail coming in here. And again, like with the previous slide, all of the red dots are cave entrances that were known prior to our work there. And the blue dots are ones that we added. This cave here, Big Laurel Creek Cave, I believe this was turned in by you, John, way back in the early 70s.
Possibly.
Yeah, it's a very great cave. It's got a nice big waterfall at the entrance, I think a 40-foot waterfall. So this was kind of like our base for starting this work here. But we also found some nice stuff. Like up in the corner up here is No Business Going Cave. This was actually found by Andy Porter, but we went back and mapped it and found quite a bit more cave than what we had found back then. Big Laurel Falls Pit. This was one right off the trail. For years, for decades, cavers had been walking down this trail to get down to the Sheep Caves and the Virgin Falls Caves, and they missed this. It's amazing. It's a 112-foot pit. You can, from the entrance of the pit, you can look down and see people hiking on the trail. That's how close it was. Dark Heart Shaft. Again, this was one just right above the trail that we found. But there's some really good stuff there to be found. So we ended up mapping Big Laurel Creek Cave. This is what it looks like. Again, I think I put this out. Yeah, this was a map we finished in 2001. It's got some nice floor detail. Entrance 150, 160 feet wide. A lot of water pours over the entrance and comes down into this room and just disappears. And I think folks have tried to push that before. To me, this is one of the great areas of potential in Scotts Gulf, this Big Laurel Creek Cave. The Big Laurel Falls Pit. This is what the map looks like after we finished the survey. On the day that we found this, it was pouring rain in Knoxville. It was in January. And Jack and I and Glenn, we all rode together. We were debating whether or not to even go that day. We ended up going. By the time we got up to the top of the plateau, it's pouring snow. He said, well, do you still want to do this? Yeah, what the heck. So we got out, got our gear, started ridge walking. And within, 30 minutes of starting the ridge walk, we found this entrance, just this steam column, just billowing clouds of steam up. And this is what it was coming from. Nice 112-foot entrance pit. There's a second pit series at a ledge that you can get off to do a 21-foot pit, followed by a 26-foot pit, and a 30-foot pit. Or you can continue on down to the very bottom and get into some nice stones. And there's a crawl down here that's got good airflow. It's going to be a dig, but who knows where it's going to go. And this was what No Business Going Cave looked like. The entrance is up in here, and just a nice passage. Do some nice stream cut stuff right before a 19-foot pit. But then below here, just got some really nice stuff. It's a real caver's cave, I think. A lot of climbing and chimneying, some crawling, etc. And the cave really is kind of interesting in that just kind of, you can really see the joint control that goes on in this cave. And this is actually coming right back up to, right over in here is where Big Laurel Creek is. So this is sinking somewhere. You don't see this water in Big Laurel Creek Cave, so it's going somewhere. This was Dark Heart Shaft. This was the one right off the trail that I found. And just some photos of No Business Going Cave. That is myself and Jack and Kevin's in up here in the upper corner. And a couple of places where water comes into the cave. It has a nice little water spray there. Again, you can see some formations down here. So about this time, Glenn Ritter, he was in business school actually at UT, and he ended up moving his wife and kids out to California. And so we kind of lost a really valuable caving partner. But thankfully, we had heard some rumors of this new cave that had been found in Scotts Gulf called Great Big Bottom Cave. And it was found by, let's see if I've got this, hey, Robert Oakes. And so we had known Robert. We had met Robert when we found Beckoning Well that day, about 6 years prior. And knew Robert was a really good caver out of Sparta, Tennessee. And somehow, I can't remember how the story goes, but we either we got in touch with you, Robert, or you got in touch with us. But you were interested in having a cave map because the cave was dug open, found by Robert, dug open by Robert, and John Fred, maybe Jeff Patton, Joel Buckner, Hal Love, some of those guys. And the cave basically was kind of scooped and not surveyed, which happens a lot, unfortunately, in Tennessee. So we started talking to Robert, and we said, yeah, let's get this cave map. And so this is a line plot of what the cave now looks like. 2.5 miles roughly of passage, some really good stuff in there. So we lost Glenn, but we gained Robert, another great valuable partner in this project. So here are pictures of the entrance dig that Robert took. I think that's Jeff over here on the left, John Fred Hutchinson on the right. The entrance is there are actually two entrances. There's one down by a bluff that has the stream coming out, and the other's kind of up on the hillside. And so this is the hillside entrance, sort of the upper entrance. It's the one that we used. We only went in the lower entrance once, and that was to map it. Never went in there again. But here's what the map looks like. Again, this was before the days I was doing digital maps. And so this is literally like a 3-foot long by 2-foot wide paper map that I had scanned at work. I had a little caption down here for you, Gerald, that said Gerald Money version, 8.5 by 11. So, that's an inside joke. Gerald always liked his maps, so I'll fill on 8.5 by 11. So filling out the topo. This is kind of what Scotts Gulf looked like. If you remember when I first showed the topo at the beginning of the slide, you can see some blue squigglies on here now. And so what we've got are our mapping efforts that we started putting out just to kind of get a picture of what these caves were like. So here's some of the work that we were doing in the Gulf. No Business Going Cave, you kind of get an idea where these things were located. The Sheep Caves, I'll show those in just a minute. We've got Great Expectations Cave down here in the lower left, and Great Big Bottom Cave, along with Gaston's Cave. This little blip here is Shop Gap Cave. Here's Rose Cave, and then Ghost River Cave. So, Great Expectations Cave. This was one of the maps that Jack did. It was a really great map. This cave, prior to us kind of taking a look at it, was in the TCS as maybe 2,000 feet long. It had the large kind of the classic entrance that sort of the hallmark of that cave. Had a couple of big rooms, and that was about it. Jack went there on one trip and ended up finding an upper entrance that has a 124-foot pit in it that came actually right down into the lower entrance room, which I'm surprised it hadn't been found before. So that was one nice discovery about this. And also on another trip that Jack and I were on in this cave, there's a passage right back here that Jack, maybe it's right up here, Jack was poking around in some breakdown and happened to worm his way down, and again, was suddenly standing in 60 to 80 foot wide portal. So he came back and found me. I was poking around over here in the river section, and the two of us explored all of this upper section up here, which was really nice. So we came back eventually and mapped the whole cave. So it's now over a mile long, 5,627 feet long. So, and here's what Ghost River Cave looks like. This was a project that I believe Alex Taylor found this cave. He found it. The story goes that they were stopping to rest, and one of them maybe was smoking a cigarette, and they noticed the smoke was going inside the hillside. So they started digging in the side of the hillside, and they found this entrance and found the cave. So I'm actually drawing this one up this year. I'm finishing that one now. And that's a project. The Upper Cumberland Grotto, I think, were the main ones that explored that cave. But here are the sheep caves. This is Lower Sheep Cave down here. This is Upper Sheep Cave. You can see how they kind of lay out on the topo. And this big, very interesting looking sink over here is, yes, Virgin Falls, yes. And that's next on our list, I think. So that's what Lower Sheep Cave looks like. I just drew this one up recently. It's a fairly complex cave with lots of levels. But you can see that there's some interesting stuff going on here. The water kind of comes in here in this entrance and it flows down and then almost comes out this other entrance, but it makes a loop and it comes down and sinks and works its way down to this point here. And I think it's going out somewhere to the river. We've never traced it.
What's up with the diarrhea triangle?
The diarrhea triangle? Right here. This is a horrible thing. I think we were on a trip with Jack and Robert, you were on that trip, and John Lillistol, and we were mapping down here, and a lot of this was virgin actually, and there's just this hole like up in the ceiling, it's shaped like a triangle. You have to kind of climb up into it, and it's just not really great. You come out, it's full of, just mud, mud. And you get up in here, all of this was virgin. And so a lot of domes down in this area.
Hey Mike, you know Nick Crawford died traced Lower Sheep.
Oh, did he really?
Yeah, comes out the Virgin Falls thing.
It comes out in Virgin Falls, the lower cave?
No,
Spring. This is the spring there in the cane.
The spring, okay. Interesting. Yeah, I'd like to see that.
The line date is in the PCS data set in the report.
Okay,
I can help direct you.
okay. So this is Upper Sheep Cave. This one's really interesting. I know that there's a cave way upstream. Clinton's here now, so I can talk about him. There's a cave way upstream in Little Laurel Creek called, I think, Little Laurel Creek Cave, something like that. And we had always seen that and read the narrative on it, which said it was a couple 100 feet long. We never went into it, but Clinton, I know you and maybe Jason Lavender and some others went up there and found like thousands of feet of cave. This is fairly recently, and I'm pretty sure the waters from that cave come out of Upper Sheep Cave.
I think a lot of it was known, they just didn't update the narrative, but we updated it.
Okay.
And it actually seems to have a split drainage issue.
Oh, really? Interesting. So what I was going to talk about Clinton earlier, I wanted to wait till he got back. Just
Do
to
it.
really commend him for kind of his vision. He and Jason and the others that work with you guys, they've been finding caves now in Scotts Gulf that we had no idea there would even be caves up there. They're finding caves basically at the top of the plateau, way up in like the Warren Point sandstone and stuff, and finding some pretty incredible things. I remember hearing about this several years ago and just being blown away by it. You know, we were always walking right by these things to at least get down to the Pennington, but these guys are finding stuff way up at 1,700 feet, 1,800 foot elevation. So kudos to you guys, that was great.
Good job.
So Rose Cave, this was a map that Haven Holzapfel did of Rose Cave. I think he and Jeff Sims and several others went there and mapped this cave. I wanted to show this because it's kind of like the evolution of a cave map, and why I think it's so important to have multiple versions of caves that are mapped in TCS. So Haven did this map, I believe, back in 1972. And you can see it's sort of probably line drawn, pencil drawn maybe. He's got a good cross section here. He's got even his north arrow with the declination on the side, so a good map, I think. Got a set of symbols. And this was the map that Jeff Sims did, I think from that same survey. And this was one that he actually drafted up. And he has a few more cross sections in his version, more floor detail. He's got maybe a few more passages shown that Haven didn't show in his map. But you can kind of see, you know, the evolution. Like here's maybe Generation 1 map. Here's Generation 2 map. And this was our map that we did. We almost tripled the known length of the cave. We mapped 8,260 feet. And you can see here the two entrances that we did. Here's the main river passage. And then this was a section over here that Bill Walter and I believe Tony Pugh found. They dug through some horrible stuff right off the second entrance here, squeezed through some things and got into some passage along this way. And this was quite a bit of cave that we added to the survey. There was also a section down in here that when we were originally mapping, we saw a little BW on the wall. So we got Bill back in there and he poked around some more and managed to find another thing going on. And so this really is an incomplete survey. We stopped mapping here and there was, you know, going passage. It was pretty horrible. But a lot of breakdown coming into the ceiling. Of course, I'm not a fan of breakdown anymore. But again, there's more going on here, and it could be, you know, paralleling this main section right
Bill,
here.
you should build
Hey,
one.
Mike, where's that water coming from in the river there?
Yeah,
Do
we
we
saw
know that
the,
insurgents?
I was about ready to talk
the
about
Okay.
waterfall down.
right here. This is the main borehole coming down, and those of you that have been in the cave, you know that the bats roost right about at this point. And if you keep going here, this was a trip that Robert Oakes and Jim Smith and I did back in 2002 or 2003. And we surveyed to the breakdown, and on the very far side, you can climb up, and there's a little slot that you can squeeze through and get down in here, and you go a little bit further, and the stream is coming out this way. There's actually water coming from this way too, but there's a dome here. It's got a 30-foot dome. And you can look up it, and you can see the Hartzell, and you can look up into the Banger up there. And the dome is just raining, pouring down. And there's actually a stream crawl here. I'm telling all my secrets. So. The cave, I should say that this is a disclaimer. The cave should be considered closed, right? It's state property. It should be considered closed, and the only access is by permit.
You should also point out there's almost certainly a camera at the entrance.
Yeah,
Then we've got all those bats, so they don't hardly ever let anybody in.
right. So anyway, there's a lead here too that I remember looking down, and it's maybe, you know, 1.5 feet high, wide, and the stream's coming from there as well, airflow. So there are leads back here. We only did one trip back there. There's a ton of water coming down this dome. You can look up at the something going on up there. So who knows? There's more to be done. I mean, I think maybe in 20 years when the next generation comes back, they'll be showing Haven's map and Jeff Sims's map and say, "This is Mike Rogers' map. Look how much they missed." You know? So just a word on the maps. Jack did 3 really fine maps in Scotts Gulf with Becking Well, Great Expectations, and a cave called Dread Rock Pit. I did 29 hand-drawn maps. A lot of my maps were smaller caves that we did, that we surveyed. At the time, I was only doing hand-drawn maps because, you know, doing like Illustrator or Inkscape maps was kind of a new thing. But my later maps were all done in Inkscape, so they're probably a little bit better quality for the map book, the TCS map book. So in all, we did quite a bit of mapping in Scotts Gulf, and that was one of our goals all along, was to try to map as much as we could. Not just find caves and scoop them and write narratives for them and put them in the TCS, but to map the caves and survey them. So this is a picture that Robert took of Jack and myself. in a cave on a very, very cold day. And so this cave here was full of ice. I remember going in here, it was really easy to get into the cave. Not as easy to come out of the cave. But anyway, just a word on like why we were doing this project in the first place, which was to map the caves. So, final notes. In the 10-ish or so years that we did this project, we added 103 new caves to the TCS, which tripled the number of known caves in TCS for Scotts Gulf. And with the stuff that Clinton, you guys have found, maybe Mike Green too, that's added a whole bunch of more caves. There's a lot. I still think there's a lot more to be found in Scotts Gulf. So our group during that time, we mapped just over 10 miles of passage in 40 different caves. 40 new maps were produced for the TCS. There were 4 additional caves mapped over 1 mile in length. If you remember me early on saying that there was only 1 cave that was mapped over a mile in Scotts Gulf. 3 new pits over 100 feet deep. And on my to-do list, I'd like to remap Virgin Falls Cave, which was the map that Jeff Sims did. I'd like to map Virgin Falls Pit and see where that one is going, because that's kind of a mystery. I'd like to remap a cave called Mill Hole, which is a big borehole cave up there as well. It was mapped early in the 70s, but there might be more to find there. And also map many of the smaller kind of unsurveyed caves. And then, of course, along the way, we can try to find the next big one. So thanks to Chuck Sutherland for your photos. Thank you so much. Bob Biddix for his photo of Beckoning Well. And Robert, you shared some photos. I really appreciate that. And Kevin Zinn, who's not here, he also had some photos. And Jack for his maps, Jeff Sims and Haven Holzapfel for their maps. This is a picture that Chuck took of Upper Sheep Cave, looking outside the entrance into the sinkhole. Just a beautiful photo, beautiful cave. So, I don't see anyone asleep yet, which is great. So, what I've got here, I like to do something for talks that I give. I like to have something that I call trivia time. So I've got a prize here. This is a Scotts Gulf survival pack. So things that kept us going on our hikes were Cliff Bars. So this is part of the survival pack. Remember the Fierce Grape that I talked about? They don't make Fierce Grape anymore, Jack. I'm sorry to say, but this is the closest I could find to Fierce Grape.
I was worried you were going to say it was a vintage bottle.
Unopened from Jack in his trunk. And a Black Diamond Carabiner. So brand new for all the vertical work you're going to do in Scotts Gulf. So the way this is going to work, I'm going to throw a question up here on the screen, and everyone gets one guess or one answer, and you have to raise your hand. You can't just shout it out. So I'm going to try to figure out who raises their hand in the right order, and if you answer it correctly, you get the survival pack. So you guys ready? Here's the question. What year did Bridgestone Firestone donate 6,000 acres in Scotts Gulf to the state of Tennessee as a wilderness area? What year?
2006?
No.
2013.
No.
2009?
No.
2004.
No.
2011.
No.
2008.
No.
Just guessing.
Wait, very bad.
2017?
No.
Wasn't it close to the 2000s or 2000?
It was closer to 2000. That's a
Three.
good hint. I'm sorry.
96.
Was it 90?
No. You already
You already answered.
You already had one guess.
That was my only guess. That's the first time I raised my hand.
98?
Yeah.
That's correct. 1998. Hey!
Process of elimination on that.
1998. So, thank you so much. I'm sorry this went on probably longer than anyone wanted it to go on, but I really appreciate the time. This is kind of a story long in coming, but I'm glad to finally tell it. So, appreciate it.